combined constellation stuff, and none of it is really given like any analysis, and you can't really push anybody from one way or another in terms of like reevaluating any of the beliefs that are part of this constellation.
Okay, so here's the breakdown of this fucking mealy mouth methamphetamine induced tirade.
What's happening, everybody? In this clip, Andrew Wilson reacts to Destiny debating Jordan Peterson. Andrew Wilson not only shoots down Destiny's terrible arguments, but also he analyzes Destiny's debate style and its many flaws. That said, let's watch Andrew Wilson show us all why Destiny isn't even on his level when it comes to debating. Let's go.
In terms of like reevaluating any of the beliefs that are part of this constellation.
Okay, so here's the breakdown of this fucking mealy mouth methamphetamine induced tirade. What Destiny's trying to get across here, and he could do it in seconds, is that people sometimes have incoherent political beliefs because if they don't start with a baseline ideology and stack up from there, they end up having incoherent, problems inside of their belief structure. I know that summary wasn't nearly as good. And then the Jenga, and what about the Jenga? We got the Jenga of political belief and the constellations in the political belief. You have to understand that sometimes they don't match up in the proper way, and I would think that they would have a proper epistemic foundation as we're moving the Jenga pieces up into the constellation of stars, and my mouth keeps on doing this, and it's
Now, the signal for released entropy, which would be a consequence of, say, violated fundamental beliefs, is a radical increase in anxiety, right? And a decrease in the possibility of positive emotion. And so people will struggle very hard against that, which is exactly the phenomena that you're describing.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree with what you said. Although,
so here's my
so I'm not sure why it's relevant to the issue I was pursuing.
I'm getting.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
Here's my issue, okay? So when I'm trying to evaluate a situation, I like to think that I have I've got some insulation from the effects of what liberals think or what conservatives think, is because on my platform, I don't necessarily have an allegiance to a particular political ideology. Like right now, I'm like center left to progressive, but I break really hard from progressive on certain issues. I think Kyle Rittenhouse is in the right. I think basically everything you guys are doing with indigenous people is insane, including the complete mass grave hoax. I think that I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment. I have beliefs where I can break from my side, pretty hardcore because I am not like allegiant to a certain political ideology.
So for one thing, nobody is completely unbiased. It's nonsense. Anybody who tells you that they aren't, or that their worldview is not informed by some particular set of beliefs, in this case for Destiny, it would essentially be degeneracy. That would be one of the informants of his belief. He can break away from political issues external to degeneracy, like the Second Amendment, which has very little to do with it, and break ranks. It doesn't hurt his neoliberal ideology. But no, he's as biased as they come. It just depends on what it is you're asking him about. But his worldview, his grounded worldview, his actual epistemology is that he's a moral nihilist. He kind of larps as a utilitarian, but he's a moral fucking nihilist, dude.
One thing that worries me with this constellation of beliefs thing is that sometimes when it comes to evaluating...
Hey, like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it.
...evaluating a particular policy or a particular problem, I feel like it's part of the constellation, and sometimes it inhibits people from like taking a step back and reasonably thinking about the issue. So when we're talking about climate change, you mentioned the WEF sacrificing tons of people, the UN, global elites, 5 times energy costs in Germany, genocidal people. I feel like this is part of like a whole thing where it's like, okay, well, let's take a quick step back and let's just like think rationally about this particular issue for one moment. Okay.
Well, you asked me what the motivation for anti-poor policies might be, so that's why I was trying
Well, I
to flesh
did,
that out.
but I got all of those things before I even asked that question. Because I think it's totally possible that somebody might say, okay, well, when you put carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it seems to cause an increase in surface temperatures. This has been happening.
I just want to let you guys know out there, for you aspiring debate bros, I'll do this myself even, right? There is a good way to navigate sometimes these conversations where you don't want to firm up a position or say something as being particularly true, even as you're saying it's true. And that's with the word seems. There is a political philosophy out there. Well, I mean, it's just a philosophy, but is being utilized more and more in the political sphere, called phenomenal conservatism. Has nothing to do with conservatism at all. What phenomenal conservatism is based around is what are called seemings. Something seems this way, you act as though it is this way until proof of the alternative is demonstrated to you. Now, that's a Reader's Digest version. But you'll see in almost all of Destiny's exchanges, and then you'll see it from Not So Erudite, you'll see it from many of these people. They say the word seems a lot because it doesn't marry them to a position. Instead, what it does is it gives them a way to slip out by saying, well, I just, it seemed that way. I'm not saying it is. It just seems to be. But the person external who's watching thinks that you are affirming that position. It's a snaky tactic, one to watch out for.
From about the 1800s, and as we started to track surface temperatures, whether the thermometer is on top of the Empire State Building or in the middle of the field, it seems like there's an average.
It seems like there's. Why can't it just be there is a blank? Why does it seem that way?
Rise in temperatures, and people all around the world are observing this. In some places more than others. If you live in Seattle,
stop them when they do that. Actually stop them and make them firm up the positions. One of the reasons these people hate me, because I'll do this to them all the time, right? It just drives them fucking crazy. I'll stop them in the conversation right there. I'll say, wait, stop. Is it that way, or does it seem like it's that way?
The word seems doesn't marry them to that position, but it can also appear that they support that position. So they can have it both ways. If it comes back around to potentially bite them, they can slip it. It's like when I first saw that, a light bulb went off in my head. That's a way of articulating what I've been trying so hard to point out about a lot of these debaters, especially Destiny, especially David Pakman. It's a perfect summation. When he said that, my mind did immediately think of all the Destiny videos I've watched, but I have to admit, Pakman popped into my head too, because beyond just using the word seems for the reason that Andrew described, he also always says something like, I didn't say that. Or if you ask him a question, do you agree that this is wrong? He'll say, well, I wouldn't do that, but here's my argument for why you're wrong. You see how that works? He gets to have it both ways. He wouldn't do it, but they're right for doing it. But I could never quite summarize it the way Andrew did with the word seems, because I've always felt like Destiny, David Pakman, Brian Tyler Cohen, these guys, they're just contrarian and trying to win the debate. And I always say there's nothing substantive that comes out of these conversations, or they're just going down a list of talking points. And how about Destiny saying he doesn't have any bias? Is it just pure coincidence then that every word comes out of your mouth is identical to the legacy media? What human on earth doesn't have bias?
And they lose their fucking minds. They lose their mind. They don't even know what to say.
20 years ago, your apartment building wasn't built with air conditioner units. You feel that now. If you live in a place in London and you've never had an air conditioner before, now that's not acceptable. I think that people on the ground can see that there are changes. And I think that scientists, when they look in labs, can see changes. It might be that some models aren't precise enough. And it might be that for reasons we don't even understand
Well, the
now,
economic models certainly aren't precise enough.
Sure, maybe that might be true.
Maybe. They can't even use them to predict the price of a single stock for 6 months. The economic models are not sufficiently accurate to calculate out the consequences of climate change over a century. Not in the least.
I like the comparison because economic models can't predict individual stocks, but they do predict the rough rise of the market. If you invest in the S&P 500,
now notice here he's saying something that he is sure about, or he thinks he's sure about. So he doesn't say it seems like they do. He says they do, right? You can really mess these people up really bad if you stop them mid-conversation and say, does it seem that way or is it that way? And you just kind of watch them. They'll spurg out about it because nobody ever does it.
On
get
cataclysmic collapse.
Nope. Even with the cataclysmic collapse accounted for, you're going to see about 7% returns on average with inflation over
I
long
wouldn't
periods
call
of time.
an average a very sophisticated model analogous
That's
to
fine,
a
but
climate change.
that's the difference between climate and weather, though, right? Is that climate isn't going to tell you what the temperature is on a given day, but it might tell you the average surface temperature over a period of 1 year or 10 years. And then that's the difference between climate and weather. That's the difference between like the market and the
hypothetical
stock.
difference.
It is a hypothetical, but again, we're seeing more and more and more data every single year that things are getting hotter and hotter. So I mean, it's
let's jump out of our cloud of presuppositions for a minute.
Sure.
Now, one of the things that
Or no, wait. Before we do that, actually, because I don't want to say there are some things that we've gotten as a result of investing in green energy that have been good. So, for instance, the power of solar energy has dropped dramatically in the United States, faster than anybody thought possible.
Yeah, but nobody uses that shit still. It's true. It has dropped in price because the government has invested tons and tons of money into it. But most people don't use that shit. Think about this, right? Most of you out there right now. You don't know anybody using solar energy for basically any fucking thing. Okay? You don't know. They're not using it for nothing. Nothing. You know, or they have one solar panel on the roof or something. You know what I mean?
That solar energy is like competitive or beating fossil fuels in certain areas. As long as you can set the solar panels up, you're literally beating fossil fuels.
Yeah, and as long as the sun is shining.
Yeah.
Well, it still is. We're not a nuclear winter yet.
No,
so.
but it isn't when it's...
Yeah, but we're not a nuclear winter. No, but there are places where the sun doesn't shine that often.
So I'm going to not acknowledge up front here that I don't know a lot about climate change, at least about the science behind it. But with the observations I've made, I do have an opinion on it. And feel free to come at me in the comments. But also, I guess, let me know if I'm on the right track with my opinion or if I'm completely crazy. Let me know. So with regards to climate change, in this conversation, I feel like Destiny defeated his own point with what he said. When they were comparing it to the stock market, he said, well, you can't predict individual stocks, but you can predict a rough estimate of what the overall market will do. Exactly, a rough estimate. So with all the different scientific models out there that give us a rough estimate, how can that possibly justify dumping trillions of dollars into green energy or all the other cockamamie things they want to put money into for something that's a rough estimate and we don't exactly know what the payoff is? And let me just go a little bit further with that. So let's say that Destiny's right and we know, which we don't, but for sake of argument, we know precisely how much the temperature of the Earth is going to rise in the next 100 years. I think it's probably pretty logical to concede that humans have some role in that increase in temperature, which makes them one variable in an equation along with, 8 billion other variables. Okay, I don't know if it's that many, but a lot. I think you get my point. I think that's fair to assume. So here's the question that I would ask to help determine how much time, money, and resources go into reversing this climate change trend. What percentage of this increased temperature are humans accountable for? I've never seen a scientist be able to articulate that. So I'm fine to concede that humans probably play some role in increasing temperatures around the world, but is it 99% our fault or is it 0.01%? No scientist that's being honest with you can tell you exactly how much. But let's say I'm wrong and there are scientists that are convinced they know exactly how much humans contribute to increasing temperatures on the Earth, right? And it's a significant percentage. Okay, let's say we dump the trillions of dollars we don't have, go further into debt, into making everything carbon neutral or whatever the terms are, green energy, whatever it is. But no other major industrialized countries do it. Then what does all the time and money and resources we dumped into it to make our country that way when no one else did? Climate change is a global problem, right? So are all these other countries just going to do what we tell them to do, because that seemed to work really well throughout history. Anyway, those are just some thoughts I have. I honestly would really love you all to give me some information back, tell me where I'm wrong, and let me know what you think about Andrew Wilson picking apart Destiny's ridiculous debate strategies, and his arguments were terrible too. Let me know. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you like watching videos of one rational person completely annihilating some pseudo smart person that thinks they have all the answers, then click on one of the 2 videos that just popped up on your screen. Otherwise, as always, I really, really appreciate you watching. The end.